Skin cancer is the most common type of cancer. In fact, it's estimated that 1 million people each year are diagnosed with skin cancer. Back in the 1970s, when I was growing up, however, that was the furthest thing from our mind. What we did was we lay out all the time trying to get that fabulous tan. We would hold aluminum foil up in front of our faces. We would smother ourselves in cocoa butter and baby oil, trying to get that deep tan. Now, look at me. I have reddish hair and pale skin. So that was never going to happen for Kathryn, but that didn't stop me from trying. Now, my mother started reading some things, some articles about skin cancer, so she did caution me about laying out so much. I was a teenager. What teenager listens to their mother? I didn't, and I just kept baking. Even in college, we would literally climb up to the dorm roof between classes to lay out and get deeper tans. So I was just idiotic and was in the sun all the time. But a few years later, my mother's the one who got a little spot on her leg. And she tried to treat it with home remedies and essential oils, and she finally went to the doctor, and it turned out it was melanoma cancer. And it metastasized, it got into her lymph system, it spread through her organs, eventually metastasized into her brain, and she died. And so a few years later, when I got a tiny, tiny fleck of skin on the tip of my nose here, I scratched it off. It came back. It was smaller than the head of a pin. I scratched it off again. It came back again, and I took myself to the dermatologist and discovered, yes, indeed, I did have skin cancer. So my dermatologist wanted to do what they most commonly do, and that is cut it off. But I had, because of my mom and the melanoma, I had been researching treatments for cancer, and I had read about a topical chemotherapy that you could put on your skin, and it would help your body, your own T cells would identify the cancer as a malignancy and would fight it. So I asked my dermatologist if I could try that, and she said okay, and she prescribed something called Effudex fluorosil, which is chemo in a tube. So I started taking this Effudex, and I would dab it on this little tiny place, and obviously the circumference of my fingertip is broader than the little tiny, less than head of a pin thing, so the cream went around the nose. Well, a couple of weeks later, that area was turning red, so I went back to the dermatologist, and she explained that while I had that one little tiny place that had manifested on top of the skin, that I had other skin cancer that wasn't showing yet, and the Effudex was finding it, and my body was starting to fight it. So, to make a long story short, as it traveled, I ended up, my entire nose was eaten up with squamous cell and with basal cell carcinoma. So now I'm putting it here, but it turned out I had two patches about the size of quarters under my eyes. Apparently my glasses must have been sucking in the rays all those years. So at that point, my dermatologist made the decision to go ahead and put this chemo all over my face. It was a strong chemical, and I'm putting it all over my face, and sure enough, I have spots everywhere. So what Effudex does is your body starts to fight the skin cancer. And of course, a tiny little patch here would have been one thing, but all over my face developed open, seeping, raw wounds, and I looked hideous. And I became very reclusive because this was a slow process. I had some areas already raw and seeping, and I had red patches coming up everywhere, and then they would develop into raw seeping wounds. I know that's gross, it's just true. So finally, when the cancer subsided, I was left with scarring. It was about as deep as acne scarring, but much bigger as far as diameter, because every place where I'd had a patch that had turned into an open wound, that was now a scar. So then my dermatologist put me on Retin-A to try to help with the scarring, but my skin was so sensitive from the Effudex that I couldn't tolerate the Retin-A. So she tried dermabrasion, and my skin couldn't tolerate that. In fact, by the time I'd been through Effudex, Retin-A, and dermabrasion, my skin had developed full-blown rosacea. I mean, the really bad kind, with rosacea acne, with blood vessels that were bursting, and the reclusive state dragged out for several years because my skin just continued to look terrible. Well, during this time, I heard about Soothe from the doctors that created Proactive, and I was not interested. I wouldn't even try it because in my mindset, what was this little green box of stuff going to do that my $225 tube of metronidazole wasn't doing for my rosacea, because my dermatologist put me on metronidazole for 2 years. Then she put me on Finacea for a year, and nothing was helping. So finally, after a year of scoffing and saying no, I decided to try the Soothe, because I heard two things. One, I could join as a consultant and I would save 25%. Still didn't think it was going to work, but then I heard 60-day money-back guarantee, and I thought, what do I have to lose, because nothing else is helping. So I tried the Soothe, and I wish I could tell you that immediately all the redness went away, but that's just not true. But what did happen was, when my skin was so hypersensitive, when I had all that rosacea, my face felt sunburned all the time. It stung. It was an unpleasant sensation, and as soon as I started using the Soothe, that burning sensation went away. Not the redness, but it was the first time in several years that my skin felt good. And so I decided to stay on the Soothe just because it felt good. And it took me about 2 months to acknowledge that my skin was changing, because I did not believe it was going to work. It took 2 months of it receding for me to finally acknowledge my skin's getting better. And it took about 4 months for me, because my skin was in such bad shape. But in about 4 months, my rosacea had cleared up. Now, I still flush easily. I flush when I get overheated. I flush when I'm speaking in front of people and I'm nervous. But it goes away in an hour. And this is something that I had lived with 24/7 for several years. So I'm very appreciative of what the products have done. But the other thing that happened was, after my friends could see a difference, and a few of my friends started ordering from me. Unfortunately, she's left, but Donna Tisdale kind of took me under her wing and became a mentor to me, and I finally kind of saw the potential of the business. And so I was also a victim of the Nashville flood and in terrible financial situation, and I decided to work this as a business, and it's really helped pull me out of debt. So I'm very appreciative for what this company has done. But the two takeaways from this are, number one, if you go out in the sun, cover up, wear your broad spectrum sunscreen, and protect that skin so you never have to go through this. And the second takeaway is, if you ever have any kind of sensitive skin or rosacea, please don't wait a full year before you try our Soothe.
Thank you.